Chilling tales for dark nights.
Knuckle Supper. Written by Drew Stepek. Performed by Jason Hill. Chapter 30. Progenies. I cleared a tube from the head bong vice thing that was sitting on the floor under the passenger seat of Copperhead's Escalade. Around the rearview mirror were the braided remains of Herman's dreadlocks. "You should take a hit, Eldritch," I said, offering the glass pipe over the center console. Bad dancehall music thumped away inside the vehicle, almost lifting the rear end as it boomed from the enormous subwoofer in the back. I blew out the smoke. "It'll take the edge off the meth." "No." With eyes bulging, he focused on driving. "What's the plan here? These windows are pretty well tinted, but I think they will stop us at the gate into the compound." He gunned the car, frequently stomping the brakes wherever he saw any obstruction on the dirt road. Sweat flooded his skeletal face. He didn't answer. His head twitched a little, but I don't think he was confirming any plan. I think he was just shaking from the speed and eating the vampire insides. I'd never really seen anyone suck down on that sewage and love it. I took another pull from the bong. The pot fought against the speed in my system, calming me and helping me focus. The lights from the compound lit up the middle of the desert like it was Las Vegas. It agitated my eyes like the sun lamps at St. Matthew's. Eldritch grinned. "Hold tight, RJ." He floored the gas pedal and licked his chops. "What the fuck are you doing? I thought all the weapons were in your hearse." "It's better to catch them off guard." "Are you nuts? You said there were a bunch of these skinhead idiots." The Escalade crashed through the main gate of the bloodsucker Auschwitz, splattering it, the two guards, and the security station everywhere. Two skinheads rolled up the hood. One of them leapt over the top of the other, which had been clipped off with such a velocity it embedded itself into the windshield. "Eldritch, what are you doing?" Before he could answer, we heard SIs landing on the roof like golf ball-sized hail knocking on the metal. They started punching their way into the cabin as Eldritch continued to drive. An arm tugged at my shirt from above. I snapped off the arm and threw it out the passenger window. The SI fell off the top of the truck. Meanwhile, Eldritch snapped the steering wheel left and right, shaking off more skinheads. That didn't deter them, though. More and more latched onto the vehicle. "Are you ready, RJ?" "Ready for what?" With his clawed index finger, he pointed in front of us to a gas pump. "That," he said. Without missing a beat, Eldritch threw the truck into cruise control and opened his door. He looked over at me. "You had better jump." Feverishly, I pushed my door open as SIs began boring into the vehicle. I jumped and rolled out. Seconds later, the SUV climbed up the gas pump, ripping open the protective plate on the bottom and the wiring beneath. A sudden spark, and everything around it was consumed by a huge fireball. I sheltered my eyes from the explosion. Somehow, Eldritch had already made it over to me, and he picked me up by my neck and ripped my jacket off because it caught fire. "No time to jerk around," he said, turning me to face behind us. Standing there was a motley crew of skinheads, Desians, and other riffraff. They charged us. "Get out of here. I can handle these children." He pointed across the compound. "She's got to be in that building." "Eldritch, you can't go." He shoved me away. We knew this was a blasted seppuku. He drew two swords from behind his back and bowed his head in prayer. Rather than ask what seppuku meant, I took off running. I turned around once to debate his decision, but it was too late. The lichen-raised would-be Hollywood star was gobbled up by the army of convicts. A tornado of sand and blood rose from the ground. I had made several bad decisions in my life. Not calling Eldritch my best friend and my strongest ally is something that I would most likely regret for the rest of it. Eldritch and Herman. They both sacrificed what little semblance of lives they had for me. The two people I respected the least in the entire world gladly gave themselves so that I could make things right. Maybe it was all the humanity that came from the shots of Bates' blood. Or maybe it was the holy blood force-fed to me by McAteer. But at that moment, I understood human compassion. I felt something much deeper than the drugs and blood that I needed to stay alive. I felt like there was a reason, a mission. I was a living creature, and I had to prove myself by not letting their deaths go unanswered. A warning siren filled the compound as I made my way into the buildings where Eldridge thought they were keeping bait. That was, if she were still alive. The entire compound filled with the blistering heat of our flamboyant entrance. Gas and smoke billowed across the desert. I took off my shirt and put it over my head. As I took it off, my palm ran against the former home of my faction tattoo. My heart pounded away at the scarred cross on my chest, almost pumping itself free from the nothingness inside. I ducked into the cover of a hallway as two SIs ran down the hall past me. "What the fuck is going on?" one asked. "That nigger drove his truck into the gas station." "Where's Dez?" "Oh, I think he's already over there. He's the only one that can keep that porch monkey in line." "I hear that." They seemed to think the Copperhead had turned Judas on them, which bought me a little more time. I didn't know how far the pack that took down Eldridge was behind me, but they had to be closing in quick. It was also only a matter of time before Dez got wind of my arrival. What didn't make any sense to me at all was why a militant black dude and a bunch of intolerant, illiterate cunts were working together in the first place. I guess they saw eye to eye on their sheer hatred for everything human. Either that, or they simply saw the way to make more money with Herman and get me out of the way. It's amazing how money can make people hypocritical. After I was sure they had exited the building, I slipped down the hall in the direction they came from. I passed room after room in the forgotten clubhouse and didn't hear a peep. By the end of the hallway, in what I believed was once a ballroom during the heydays of the Salton Sea, I finally heard a TV, some laughter, and the faint whimpering of a little girl. I crept closer, knowing that this was my destination and, most likely, my grave. The foyer area in front of the ballroom had two doors on opposite sides of the room. A little farther down, the hallways branched. One had a sign that read "Kitchen." The other read "Backstage." Not really wanting to relive my stage performance at the Opera House for obvious reasons, I took the route to the kitchen. The laughter increased and I was sure that only two people were in the ballroom with bait. To camouflage my footsteps, I sat down on the permanently clammy carpet and took off my boots. The pot had worn off and my heart resumed its uncontrollable rush from the meth. I gagged on the smells in the air. The combination of dead wharf smell and gas fire was such an overwhelming mix that it tasted like a rotten fish fry at a soup kitchen as the scent made its way from my nose down to my throat. I got back to my feet and pushed the swinging kitchen door open only to be knocked back by another smell. A gust of nail polish remover, burnt household, and noxious eggs overpowered the rotten fish fry. The kitchen had been converted into a makeshift meth lab. What seemed like hundreds of bathtubs lined the room and even more test tubes cooked over Bunsen burners. It was the largest drug lab I had ever seen. I shuffled through the labyrinth of bathtubs bubbling with off-yellow repurposed decongestants and 99-cent store disinfectants. The concoction snapped, crackled, and popped, ready to ignite at any second. It was amazing that the place hadn't already gone up in flames. It disturbed me that a gang with the collective intelligence of a slow 5-year-old had constructed a room full of liquid dynamite. Thankfully, Eldridge hadn't aimed his joyride here. The whole place would have gone up like Hiroshima and we would have all died. I pulled my t-shirt from my head and covered my nose and mouth instead. I made my way to the end of the nuclear cookery to the swinging door that led into the main ballroom. I peered through the round observation window. Mountainous big-screen TVs filled the room, each screen showing a different sporting event. 2 SI sat by the stage, not interested in the feast of athletics that surrounded them. Sure enough, I spotted Bait. She was center stage in front of an enormous drooping curtain that was tagged with the SI swastika symbol. She looked exhausted and was half suspended and half standing barefoot on a saguaro cactus that was laying on its side. She struggled to stay awake and alert, her toes trembling to find purchase on the plant in the safe, green spaces between its large needle clusters. Around her neck, both supporting and choking her, was a noose, poorly tied to a light fixture over the stage. Worst of all, the safety lever of a live grenade was held between her blood-drenched inner thighs. The 2 wretched neo-Nazis threw darts at her, seeing who could be the first to knock her off and blow her inside out. I didn't have much time. I backpedaled through the meth lab, deciding that I wanted to get behind her on the stage. If I was going to be the hero, I had to put my dick-sucking incident behind me. Meth liquid continued to crackle, and one of the biggest bubbles exploded and singed my right arm, nearly melting a hole all the way through my bicep. Clamping my mouth shut so I wouldn't let out a pained yelp, I ripped the shirt off my face and wrapped it around my arm like a tourniquet, pulling it tight with my teeth. As curiously as I had entered the kitchen, I slipped out. The alarms and disorder from the outside grew louder. I shuffled to the other side of the intermission area in front of the ballroom and beelined down the other hall. "She's getting close," one of the skinheads delighted. "Shit, this is like Jenga, only way cooler," returned the other. I jumbled my way up the small staircase that led backstage, trying my best to keep the badly mildewed parquet flooring from creaking. When I reached the center of the curtains, I knelt on one knee in a starting gate running position. Trying to remain undetected, I slid my hand through the parted curtains. The roaring of the televisions helped too. As soon as I had my hand positioned, I let out a calming whisper. "Drop the grenade, Bait," I said. "Don't turn around." A dart flew through the curtain, barely brushing the wound on my arm. Bait's legs opened and the grenade fell into my hand as she plunged into the grip of the rope around her neck. The skinheads cheered as her neck slipped sideways, and they covered their sensitive ears, preparing for the impending explosion. Bait gagged on the rope as the quick asphyxiation began. I jumped into action, vaulting myself to the curtains and snagging Bait off the line with my injured right arm. I curled her inward and then dropped her to the floor before jumping toward the SIs, who stood up in shock, hands still covering their ears. "Holy shit," the dirtier of the 2 let out. The other turned around, tripping at first but finding his balance quickly, and then headed toward the doors, arms and legs thrashing around in fear. I landed with my cupped hand directly onto the face of the first dirtbag. Without hesitating, I pounded the grenade through his crooked meth teeth and down into his throat. His eyes crossed as I let go of the safety lever. I then flipped his entire body over my shoulder and threw him toward his fleeing colleague. His chicken shit buddy turned around only to be clobbered by the human projectile. He scratched his friend's face for a split second, trying to release the grenade and save his own life before both their bodies exploded in a mixture of body parts and theater shrapnel. Flesh and bone confetti snowed around the room as the smoke that delivered them set off the sprinkler system. I rushed back to Bait and tried to cradle her back to life in my arms. "RJ," she sniffled. "Yeah, it's me, Bait." She looked beyond me back toward the resting place of the 2 skinheads. "Look out." Carelessly, I dropped her head on the floor as I turned and sprung back to my feet, bracing myself for an attack. Pouncing toward me, naked, was my old protege, Dez. With bloodlust in his eyes, Dez hissed and growled like a mountain lion whose den had just been disgraced by a pack of coyotes. He knocked me backward into one of the televisions, then poured his head into Bates' chest cavity. I crashed into the TV and sparks pricked at my eyeballs, fizzled out and smoked. I tried blinking to stop the storm of broken electronics, but my sight became increasingly blurry as tears welled up to prevent damage. Des landed on top of me, crunching down on my shoulder with his teeth and dug his thumb into the meth-inflicted trauma on my arm. He grabbed a huge hunk of glass off the floor and plunged it into my sternum, always with the weapons. "Who's the fucking leader now, RJ?" he shrieked. My blood coated his face and smeared his grimace from the tips of his ivories straight up into his gums. "Who's the fucking leader now?" Des bit me again with his locking jaw, this time to my other shoulder. He clamped down harder, sensing the tender flesh from where the armless Desian had locked his hooks into me. He grabbed the front of my hair and savagely beat me into the glass display of the TV. In his madness, Des's voice slipped and changed pitch. His teeth tugged on my clavicle as he howled, and salty tears dripped into my ravaged lacerations. He shuffled into a kill position by releasing his mouth and pinning me down with his knees. I felt like the dogs that Eldritch and I had eaten alive earlier that night. "She's dead, motherfucker," he beamed like a shit-eating bastard kid. "I kept her alive because I knew you'd be back. I wanted you to see me kill her, you piece of shit." He withdrew the glass shard from my face, and then, as quickly as he had attacked, he retreated. He bounced back across the room and pounded through a window. The shattered glass smashed to the floor directly on top of Bate. She coughed. "RJ?" I tried to blink, but the burns in my eyes caught my lids, making it impossible for me to close them. Bate coughed again. "RJ, are you alive?" "I'm here, Bate." I flopped myself over, out of the frame of the TV. I dug my fingers into the ballroom floor and gradually towed myself away from the mess. "Hang on. RJ, hurry," she wheezed, choking on blood. I pulled myself farther, breaking both sides of my vulnerable clavicle and ignoring the mauling I had just suffered at the hands of my so-called best friend. "I'm coming, Bate." I reached her, cradling her frail body again in my arms. Shards of glass stuck into her like a pincushion. Without being able to see clearly, I did my best to pull out the larger pieces. "Stop, RJ." "It's okay. I'm going to help you. I'm going to get you to a hospital or something. I can get you to Pico. He can help." "Stop. You don't need to do that." "God damn it, Bate, you can't die." "You don't need to do that, RJ." She coughed out a huge clot of blood as I held her close. She shivered. I felt around the glass. Des managed to cave in her chest when he landed on her. I put my left wrist behind her neck and slipped my right forearm under her legs. "You don't need to do that," she said again, spitting out her 2 front buck teeth. "Why do you keep saying that? I need to help you." "Where have you been, RJ?" "Bate, shut up. I need to get you some help." "You don't need to do that," she whispered again for the umpteenth time. She was more delirious than me. "Come here." I bent the side of my head down to her lips. "Make me like you. Bite my neck." Her legs started thumping against the ground. "You can make me live forever. You're a vampire." "I can't do that, Bate. That's not how it works." "RJ, come here." I put my ear to her convulsing face. "Make me one of you. I want to be a vampire." As I felt her breathing freeze up and her soul begin to escape, I turned her head sideways. My vision started to clear just enough to see her smile under her skunky, greasy hair. "I'm going to be a vampire," she said, as I bit down into her neck. I took my mouth off her neck and whispered back, "I want to be like you, Bate." "Hi, hot guy," she said as I felt a comforting hand grasp my shoulder. And then she went limp in my arms. I sunk my teeth back into her neck, hoping maybe I could save her. Her blood tasted innocent and naive. She was the greatest tasting human in the world. She was everything right and wrong with the universe. She was my only tie to a normal life. A life I knew I could never have. And I was her tie to a world she wanted so desperately to fit into. "Can you give me a second, Eldritch?" "Yes, my friend." He released his hand from my drooping right shoulder. His creepers slowly tapped across the floor as he walked away. Another explosion went off outside and the power shut down in the ballroom. As I pulled a dart out of her face, I gazed into Bates' eyes for one last look at what she would never become. "It's over now." I crossed her arms across her chest and closed her eyelids. "RJ," Eldritch yelled across the room. "Catch." I didn't bother to attempt to catch the object without looking. Nothing that cool ever seemed to work for me. It landed on the ballroom floor next to me. It was the keys to the hearse. "I'm too fucked up to drive," he said. I hugged Bate all the way to sleep. I knew what had to be done. Good evening. This is Jason Hill, host of the Horror Hill podcast. You've been listening to a chapter from the award-winning novel Knuckle Supper by best-selling author Drew Stepek. Knuckle Supper, Ultimate Gutter Fix Edition, and its critically acclaimed sequel, Knuckleballed, are available now from Bloodbound Books. Check out the links in the video description and sticky comments below to pick up a copy today and show your support for indie horror. Also, please consider making a donation to Children of the Night today and help end teen prostitution and human trafficking. Children of the Night is a privately funded non-profit organization established in 1979 with the specific purpose of providing intervention in the lives of children who are sexually exploited and vulnerable to, or involved in, prostitution and pornography. Visit childrenofthenight.org for more information today. From author Drew Stepek and all of us here at Chilling Tales for Dark Nights, thanks for listening and for your support.
Chilling Tales